Hey there! Welcome to Biz Ops Exposed, the interview series that shatters myths in business operations and uncovers truths that drive success. My name is Tonya Kubo. I am your host, and joining me today are my absolute two favorite operations experts, Sonia Narvaez and Gwen Bortner. Welcome, you two. So good to have you here. Now, if you don't know, Gwen is the founder and an operations strategist at Everyday Effectiveness. So she brings 35 years of biz ops experience across 40 industries to guide founders in stepping into their power as CEOs. Meanwhile, Sonia is the owner of Operation QOL, where she transforms businesses at the ground level by organizing and optimizing their operations. Together today, we are exploring the unseen gears of business efficiency and profitability. Specifically, we are going to be talking about the undervalued role of operations in driving business success. Because something that the three of us have known, and as a marketing professional myself, I have seen it even on my end, is that many times the impact that operations has on business growth is actually hidden. And so it's easy to overshadow it with sales and marketing and other things that feel much more customer facing. So with that in mind, Gwen, I would love if you could just in a couple of sentences, right? We don't need to describe operations. You've done such a great job in the past with the show of describing it simply as anything that's not customer facing. Right? So whatever sits between sales and marketing and fulfillment, that's what business operations is. But how does it fit into an aligned strategy for a business?
So when I think of operations being aligned strategically, it's really looking at what is the most important thing for the vision? Where are we headed right this moment? And based on that, what element of that very, very wide crevasse between the sales and marketing piece and the actual fulfillment do we need to focus on right now, right at this moment? Often it's a bottleneck. Bottlenecks are, a common descriptor that we find, but sometimes it's the root cause of the bottleneck, which is where we're really starting to look strategically to say, let's not just put a band-aid, on whatever this thing is. Let's actually, dig in, get out the infection, put stitches in, do what needs to be done. Because we're looking at that bigger picture and that overall piece and seeing how each of those pieces link together for that longer term vision, and not necessarily just focusing on the thing that is obvious, but the thing that's going to have the longest term impact for where the business is actually moving toward.
Got it. So thank you for that. So Sonia, as our resident implementer here, I'm curious how you see that play out in that tactical day-to-day execution of what a business needs to do to get the job done.
So that strategy actually acts as our guide. It is our shining star, our North Star. So it is what helps us to determine what those actions are on a daily basis that help us get closer to accomplishing our mission, our vision, what we're really aiming to do in the business.
Okay, well, thank you. So now I know how it fits at a high level, and now I have that boots on the ground tactical piece of how operations helps us get the job done. So now, Gwen, before we have talked about just that feeling, I think Sonia always says, people, especially creative entrepreneurs, their fear is that you're going to put stuffy structure and they're going to lose all their creativity. And that's a real fear, right? Because nobody went into business for themselves to be boxed in to something that doesn't feel like fun. So where do you see in your work, Gwen, operations supporting innovation and market responsiveness for a business? Maybe a couple of examples.
Yeah. So for me, and as someone who also was, formerly in the creative world as a professional creative, the reality of what we believe and what is true are two completely different things. We think we want a blank canvas, but most of the world actually wants a little bit of constraint so that we know where we need to look. Even in the example of a blank canvas, you still have just the canvas, right? It's not everything in the entire, universe. There's always some constraints. And by knowing what the constraints are, that allows you freedom within those boundaries to do the things that you need to do. Now, getting back to the more specific question of, how does this start to play out, is when you can put those constraints in, particularly if you've got anyone else on your team, and I'm not talking necessarily about full-time employees, even, a very, very part-time virtual assistant, role. When they know what their boundaries are, that allows them to do the things in between without having to interact with you. And so it creates this freedom, creates this opportunity for them to start being able to make good choices and good decisions without you having to be there every single solitary step of the way. It also allows for you to see when those boundaries need to change for whatever reason. There's lots of reasons why they may be changing. From a strategic standpoint, you may be, going into a new market. You may be, changing an aspect of your business model. Any of those kinds of things probably means some of those boundaries need to change. And by knowing clearly what they are, then it's so much easier to clearly redefine them to what they need to be. But that still allows a lot of freedom in the middle. An example that one of my clients just had recently, it was very cute because her statement she kept saying is, "And did I tell you we saved $1,500? And did I tell you we saved $1,500?" And it was because they had been doing a thing for years. It's an annual event kind of a thing, and part of it is a free giveaway, and they buy a thing that they're going to give away, right? And so before she put these operational boundaries in place, the responsibility was hers. No one questioned her. She would just say, order X, and they would do it, and they would just, go down the road. But once she put some of these operational boundaries in, her staff questioned her and said, "Is that the best idea? Do you mind if I look to see if we can find another alternative?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, sure, go ahead." And we saved $1,500 was what the result was. But it was because the boundaries were there so that the other staff knew what they were allowed and not allowed to do. But before that, because the systems weren't in place, the boundaries weren't there, they didn't know that it was appropriate to be able to question her on that.
Okay, so I just heard two things. So one is constraint is freeing, which I'm sure is written in a bunch of business. Yeah, I'm sure that's written in a bunch of business books. That's not new information, but I do think that how you're describing it feels new. Like I haven't really thought about it that way. The other thing I heard in this example of the client is sometimes when it's just us inside our heads, right? We're doing what we've always done simply because we've always done it. And I wonder if there's sometimes we don't delegate or we don't write things down because we don't want to be questioned. Because maybe we just do what we do, right? We don't want to think too deeply on it. But also in your example, by being questioned, I mean, they actually moved the business forward and saved a decent chunk of money.
Oh yeah. I mean, $1,500 is not going to, make or break most businesses, but it's $1,500 to do something else with, right? And that was just like one very, very tangible example of it. But because those same systems and processes are in place, I could probably list 10 different things that
Right.
all show up differently within the operations because they're in place. And when I was talking to my client, the thing I kept,
Mhm.
congratulating her on is letting go of that ownership is tough because most of us start these businesses pretty much by ourselves. And so it's the way our brain works, right? Is that we have to
Mhm.
make all the decisions, we have to do all of it. And so moving out of that is challenging. And it's less of a tactical issue and more of a mindset issue. And this is also where the strategy starts coming into play of, do you have the people, do you trust the people to actually work with you in that way so that it's actually productive.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And then Sonia, so maybe about a month ago, you and me were having a conversation, and you had mentioned how you could tell when the pandemic hit, you could tell the difference between the businesses that had strong operational structures and the ones that didn't. And like, not only was it glaringly obvious to you, but it was making a real impact on their employees and also on their delivery of customer service or the product that they were fulfilling. So can you explain to me a little bit about how, like, what you saw differently between those who could adjust quickly and those who couldn't?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, one, stemmed from the top down, right? It like you saw the level of trust people had for each other when we were forced to work from home, or lack of the trust that we had for each other. It also plays into kind of what, Gwen just mentioned in terms of, you don't need to have, like, when things are outlined, when there is structure, when there are systems, when there's things documented, you don't need to have someone over your shoulder 24/7 like you did when you were starting out in the same company. One thing that I definitely saw was a huge difference was that ability for people to answer questions, ask questions, feel the liberty to, like, they had to kind of shift their perspective as an employee, as a manager, as an owner, as a leader, when you're working from home and in this pandemic, versus when you would be able to kind of interact with somebody in an office, or like when you'd be able to just walk over to somebody else's desk. You could see that communication breakdown in the companies that did not have really good systems and structure in place. You also saw lots of balls being dropped because if there were not clear job responsibilities or accountabilities laid out, you were like, oh, well, Joe and I always talked in the office to figure out who was going to do this today. Not when we were in the pandemic. I was home and Joe was home, and all of a sudden we've got two different versions of the same thing. In the case of, like, when you guys talked about the newsletter last week, right? One newsletter hadn't been written. You weren't even if you hadn't been in the office, it would have been really evident you probably didn't write that newsletter. But because of the amazing systems and structure you had in place, it was really evident to Andrea that, it wasn't written. She took the initiative, and that was just what happened. And so you could really tell who also felt like they had ownership over their role and the ability to make decisions on and in their position. So a lot of times, I will, when I was working a little bit more with people in the office, I would ask a lot more of, like, oh, can I do this? Oh, would it be okay if this happens? I knew what my job responsibilities were. I knew what everything needed to be done. I was pretty blessed with some amazing managers, but there was just this level that I always felt like I needed to ask. And it kind of, like, well, had I been working in corporate when the pandemic happened, it would have probably been exacerbated because you're not sure what foot to put in front of you if somebody isn't near you, because of the fact that there is not a clear set of delineated kind of roles and responsibilities or delegated tasks. So there's a lot of there was a lot of a struggle in communication for a lot of teams because they had to kind of shift into this other mode when the pandemic hit.
Okay. So what I'm hearing really is the communication breakdown was the biggest bottleneck you saw affecting businesses in the pandemic that didn't have those strong structures in place. Is that true? Okay. Now, Gwen, did you see the same?
I saw a similar thing. I mean, absolutely saw that no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm.
But I also saw additional things. And part of it was related to I work with a number of clients that also sell physical product, right? That have they're either distributors of, wholesale distributors, they're retailers, they're selling physical product with physical plants, that they're doing this in, right? So they have a brick and mortar storefront, or they have a manufacturing facility, and so obviously COVID hit them differently, because it wasn't just knowledge transfer. There was tangible stuff going on, but what I noticed is those who did have stronger operation boundaries in place, we're able to say, how do we take that and twist that in a way that now works in this environment, instead of having to rethink everything around it, right? That they were able to say, okay, so this is Joan's responsibility. Joan, think about all the ways that we could do this for you to be able to do this from home, instead of you being able to do it here. Or one of my clients had a gal who, because of her health issues, even when there was starting to be some limited coming back into the workplace, she was completely uncomfortable doing that, and for all the appropriate reasons. And so they talked about, well, what else could we do? Well, one of the things that she did that they have never done before was looking at, how else do we get in contact with our customers? And so she actually picked up the phone, the thing that we use for texting and photographs, right?
That thing makes calls?
That thing makes calls, and because of the business they had all of their phone numbers, called all of the customers and just said, how are you doing? I mean, just, are you okay? Which was a completely different way to do marketing for them at the time. But it was being able to say, this person has really great interpersonal relationship skills, because this was someone who was great on the sales floor. And it's like, let's let her do the sales thing from home without having any actual product to sell, right? So it was really understanding where people had really strong skills. How do we take that? How do we, twist it, in some way to make it useful, and not have to completely recreate everything in all aspects. But when people had ownership, it was much easier for them to be able to think about, oh, well, instead of doing it this way, we could do it that way, and because they knew enough about it, and they felt like they had enough ownership, and they were able to be creative in solving the problems.
Okay, so that's really interesting to me, because when I think back, and I kid you not, feels like a lifetime ago for me, right? Because I had little tiny kids, and we were all in the same house at the same time, and it was a little scary. But when I think back to like that period of time, that March, April, because it's about a year ago now, right? That everything shut down. We were preparing for
4 years ago.
4 years ago. Sorry, 4 years ago. Yeah. See, I don't even know time. I just proved my point there. Okay. But
yeah, no, I just verifying verifying what you said. You have no concept. Yeah.
No concept. So 4 years ago, we were getting ready for an in-person conference. And I remember there was one meeting which was all focused on how do we get people to shut out everything that they're being told and all of their fears and show up anyway. And then in the next meeting, right after, that decision was made for people in most locations, then it was, okay, well, now that's no longer a choice. So Now we have to rethink the program. So initially there was this huge resistance in rethinking the program, right? We've always done it this way. It's always worked. It's always been effective. We always get 5 stars on our evaluations. And that choice, back to your point, Gwen, about constraints being freeing, that choice being removed then got everybody together in a room to have the conversation that you just referenced, which was, okay, so let's go through our typical flow of the program. Okay, so we have an icebreaker. Okay, why do we have an icebreaker? Oh, okay, because these people, this is a global event. People come from all over the world. We want them to get to know each other. Okay, then we do this, then we do that. Okay, and then we have people talk in pairs. Okay, why do we do that? Oh, that's really valuable. Okay, how can we do that online? Right? And we started to really look at, question everything in the program, what the result was, and then, to your point, went back to what's the best way to mimic that online? Can it be mimicked online effectively? That was a good question that kept getting asked, which I don't think everybody was asking back then based on those early virtual events we all went to. But can it be mimicked? Because how many virtual events, thinking back to 4 years ago, and I'll shout this out to the viewers right now too, how many events did we go to really felt like somebody took their in-person program and just slapped it on Zoom and sat us in front of a Zoom call for 15 hours straight because they didn't think to schedule a bathroom break, because when you're in person, people will just duck out and go to the bathroom. So the reason I'm spending a little bit of time on this is because I don't think anybody 4 years ago went around going, oh, we have an operational problem. I think 4 years ago, everybody said, look at how this pandemic has ruined my life. Look at how it's ruined my business. When the fact is it didn't ruin everybody's lives. It didn't ruin everybody's businesses. It just was about how well thought through why you did what you did was before things changed. And then when the constraints came into play, things were pretty clarifying for folks. So thank you for bringing that up. And Sonia, thank you for being the person to really point out that the pandemic really showed a lot in terms of that dividing line between who had those operational structures in place and who didn't. And now what I want to talk about, because you guys know I'm a community person. I love community. I love online community building, belonging, and all those things. I just want us all to be good friends together. And that a lot of times comes from the culture we build, right? And so what I really want to talk about is how operations supports a strong company culture, whether you're a company of one, because you shouldn't, if you are your own boss, you really shouldn't come to work every day hating your life. That would be sad for all of us, right? And if you're, team of 3, team of 300, team of 3,000, doesn't matter. I think culture is really important, and operations seems to have a place in that based on what you've said. But the thing to me, the first thing we have to talk about is if you guys, especially as experts, see that operations isn't valued in most organizations because the impact is hidden, I think the first thing I have to ask you both is, how do you show that value? And I'm going to take it a little bit deeper, and I'm going to be talking to myself here because I know what kind of CEO I am, or at least I used to be before I started working with you guys. But I want to be, when somebody sits there and tells me, okay, I need to know your process, you need a checklist. My least favorite word in the English language is checklist. Okay, I don't want to create one, and I don't want to follow one. I want to just let the energy of the room move me into what I do next. That's how I really want to operate. So when you come to me and say, Tonya, where's your checklist? I'm going to be like, what? Huh? What are we talking about here? Oh, I think I hear my mommy calling. And then if you actually have the nerve to ask me to create a checklist, I'm like, la, 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 and I want to go clean my baseboards, which I never actually do. But I always want to do those when somebody asks me to create a checklist. So the first question I have is, talk to me as a CEO. How do I convince myself that there is value to making the time to writing down a process, whatever it is, writing down that checklist? Because I think if I don't value it, how do I get anybody else to? All right. So Gwen, you get to go first, and then Sonia, I'll let you add to that.
So there's 1,000 thoughts that are coming to my
Sorry.
to my head. Well, no. But part of it is because my core philosophy is context matters, right? As my business philosophy. And so the first thing I'm always focused on is let's, and Sonia's probably going to roll her eyes at me, which is okay, but but let's get away from the tactical and let's not do a checklist then, because you hate checklists. Let's figure out a different way. Now, I also know Sonia well enough to know that it's like, no, we don't have to do it one way. There are multiple ways to solve this problem, right? But for me, it's first, because back to, strategy is helping you understand the strategic importance of operations and how many other things it's affecting. A conversation I had not very long ago with someone, I just kind of blurted out as part of the conversation that you probably only know 2 ways to do this. I probably know 10. And the reason that you're stuck is because the 2 ways that you know don't work. And she was like, it never occurred to me that there's more than one way to do this. Right. And in doing that, it was like, oh, there are more than one way, there is more than one way to do this. It doesn't have to be a checklist, using your example, right? There are other ways to do this. So so that's one of the things. But from a strategic standpoint, I am always looking at, let's talk about all the other places that this is touching, right? Because my first thing always is, if you make $1 more in sales, that does not hit $1 more on the bottom line. Almost never. Almost never.
You need to explain yourself there. I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. You have to explain yourself there. Like,
okay,
how does $1 more?
I'll use a bigger number than $1. I'm going to use $100 or 1,000. Right. So you make an additional $1,000 sale. Okay. There are costs that come with that sale, whether it be your time, the product that has to go out if you're selling a physical product. With the physical product, there's also shipping. So the $1,000 doesn't just magically get to the bottom line where we have that beautiful number that we like to call profit, right? Because in the
I like
giant
that number, by the way.
Yeah, it's the awesome number. So in the giant world, and totally simplifying finance way more than it is, there's income, there's some sort of cost of the income that makes a number we usually call that gross profit, and then there's expenses, which is a whole bunch of things, and then there's net profit, which is that's like the really important number right at the bottom. But $1,000 coming in here doesn't create $1,000 here at the bottom. Almost never. There can be situations where that's true, but pretty much not. However, if I save you $1,000, so you don't have to spend $1,000 in delivering whatever you're already delivering, that goes right down to that bottom line.
Okay. So thank you for walking us through that, because I know for you, it makes perfect sense. But yes, I will be honest, I don't think most of us ever think that. We just think if we make $1,000 more, then there's $1,000 more in our bank account. Because some of those costs that you mentioned are hidden. That, I think, now that you're bringing this up, that is why I think the impact of operations is hidden in most businesses, because we don't know the cost of acquiring the client or the customer or selling the product.
Right. And
sorry, I interrupted you. Finish your thought.
No. It's great. And Mallory is putting a comment on, which is exact, you and I have talked about this many times, and Mallory is 100% correct that, there's these 7-figure businesses like, woohoo, look at, I've got 7 figures. It's like, but how much are you actually putting in your pocket? And there are many stories. I know of people who went from a really solid 6-figure business to a 7-figure business, and what we're making way less. You know, you and I were on a call with a client probably over a year ago now, where she's like, they keep talking about 7-figure, and I'm not, and when I do the math, I'm not sure that I actually make more money. And I said, yeah, you probably won't. She's like, but it's doubling the size of my, you know, it's doubling my revenue. And it's like, yeah, but to support that, you're also going to have to raise your expenses. And so that's the challenge with any business. There's a point where the increased revenue also has some relatively direct proportional raise with the profit. And then there's these levels where the increased revenue actually doesn't raise the profit or decreases the profit. And then we can start the process up again. And so it's not just, you know, increased revenue is increased profit in some sort of, you know, same line, right? And it is all of those hidden expenses. I was having a conversation with one of my clients yesterday specifically about this, where because the CEO, highly creative, lovely person, great energy, but gets so excited about things, and because she wants to immediately act on it, that distracts the rest of the team from doing what they were doing. And I'm pretty confident if we can let her share that, but not get the entire rest of the team to act, she can probably get twice as much work out of the same people. So you're now basically doubling your staff without doubling your salary.
Okay, I want you to hold that thought, because I want to bring Sonia back into the conversation here. And I don't want to forget her, because look at her. She is so prepared. Okay, so I'm sorry, but we got to park it here, because what I don't want to do is I don't want somebody watching to feel like they just accidentally stepped in to an internal team meeting and there's all this jargon and all this insider lingo happening. But what I think I just heard you say, Gwen, is one problem that you just described with I'm going to call them a visionary CEO, right? Because a lot of CEOs, they have big ideas, and that's why they had a company, because they had an idea that nobody else had.
98% of them are going to fall into that.
Yeah. So they have ideas, and part of the problem when you don't have a structure in place, whatever you want to call your structure, is they hire folks who are attracted to their ideas, attracted to their energy, whatever that is. And those folks will take every new idea as an order and instantly execute it. And it sounds to me like that's where some CEOs that I've met, at least, will feel like, you know, my team is we're so busy, but I can't tell that we're getting anything done. So I just need you to tell me, am I understanding that point correctly? Or am I missing something here?
Yeah, that's it. It is it's a version of bait and switch. They're headed down the path. They're doing the thing they're supposed to do. They are then directed to do something else, so they do that, and then they do this, and they do this other, and as you said, the CEO is like, "Gosh, but I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere," and it's like, well, kind of politely, because you're not.
Right. Okay.
Sonia, I know, has thoughts on this.
Yeah, like Sonia, I know it's a little bit awkward, but I just want you to jump in on this and, you know, tell us your thoughts. I mean, is this tracking with what you've experienced? Do you have something that's a little bit different?
I'm not gonna lie to you. I just had a brain fart, and everything that I was like mentally prepared to share, like, woo, has flown to Disney World. So do me a solid and repeat the question.
Well, actually, what I want to do is I'm gonna, you know, I
Like
mean,
I got really go into the
it's all
Gwen,
good.
your explanation, and I was like, and then Tonya, you said it's like they tapped into an internal team meeting, and I was like, yeah, but I love it right now. Like this is it for me. Like so it's like,
That's
wait.
okay. Well, what I want to do is because, for those of you watching the recording or listening to the recording, wherever you are accessing us right now, this is recorded live, right? So we have live viewers, and we've got a comment right now that I think can help us all out in terms of getting us maybe a little bit back on track on the conversation, which right now, at least those of us who are in the online marketing space, we are seeing a lot of influencers, a lot of people who had big audiences, million, 2 million, 2.5 million. Some of them had more, who like exited social media specifically, but really just, left their YouTube channels, abandoned them, left Instagram, left the influencery world. Some went to work for somebody else, right? They actually went and got a job because they were so burned out. They just didn't want to make decisions anymore. Others of them just stepped out of the public eye, and who knows what they did. And we've got about a handful who have recently come back. And one thing I can tell you that all of them have talked about, at least the ones that I have seen, I can't speak for every single one on the planet, right? Leave it to a marketing person for broad generalizations. But one of the trends that I have heard, that common thread, is I kept going to these events, right? Because there's this thought where, okay, at this level, I buy $1,000 programs. And at this level, I buy $10,000 programs. And then at this level, I'm in $100,000 programs, right? And when you're in a $100,000 program, you have to have $100,000 ideas. And pretty soon you're in these masterminds and you start comparing yourselves. Though you were perfectly fine, you're going, well, this person's doing this and that person's doing that. And I want to do the same thing. And then you start building out this organization that is not in alignment with your values, but you start to have to feed the monster, feed the machine. And in many cases, this is the downside of online business. And I know, Gwen, you work a lot with online businesses and offline businesses, right? So your experience is a little bit different. But what I have seen is online businesses can turn into gigantic monster octopuses really, really fast, where they can grow well beyond their operations before even the CEO notices. So to Gwen's point, when she's talking about, working with clients who sit down and go, okay, if I go from $500,000 to $1 million, I don't see where I'm going to make more money. And Gwen has to be the truth teller there and go, yeah, because you're not. Because really, you're going to spend that extra $500,000 operating $1 million business, which does not add anything to your CEO salary. So, Sonia, the question for you, I think, is at the tactical level, what do you tell the CEO who comes to you and says, oh, how about let's do it this way. Give me 2 questions you would ask me as a CEO if I went to you and said, I've got this $250,000 business and I want to scale to $1 million. And I want you to help me do it, Sonia. Ready, set, go. What 2 questions will you ask me? And Gwen, I'm going to let you ask me 2 more questions because I know you always have a lot of questions.
Well, honestly, the first questions I ask on anything for anybody when I onboard my clients is, what are your personal core values and what are your personal long-term goals? Because we're going to have to make a lot of changes from, if you want to go from 250K to 1 million and still try to keep a portion of your salary during that time. We're going to have to do things very differently. And, it takes a lot more innovativeness, getting out of your comfort zone. What are you really willing to do to get to where you want to go? But first I need to understand personally, what are those values, and personally, what are your goals? Because if your goals are to, be rich and make a lot of money, that's going to be very different than I want to spend time with my family, right? So how we build your business to get there, how long it might take, will change based on what those values and goals are. And, I am going to say that I had a wonderful conversation with Gwen yesterday about this. And, actions and what your values are, they are connected. But you have to start to discern, like, what are really those values and how are you actually going to do what needs to be done in order to get to them? Or are your values and goals something else? In which case, everything that you're doing is actually aligned with those. So someone's got to change. You got to decide which one it is. So those are the two questions that I always really want to find out about, because that's going to inform how we build any type of structure in the business, how we build any type of systems, any type of processes, even what programs we launch in their business. So and when I mean programs, I mean tech programs, right? So any type of task management, project management, like any type of communication tools, everything, all of that information goes into how we build the business together.
Okay. Gwen, what questions would you ask me?
So this is why Sonia and I are like buds, is because she asked the same two questions that, in a slightly different way, but because mine is, why? Why are you building your business from 250 to $1 million? And there's all sorts of reasons, why. And my goal is not to judge your why, but my goal is always to judge, is your why actually your why?
Oh.
Not okay. So when
Say
I
more.
say so when I say why, I want to understand, is it your why, or is it the why that you have convinced yourself that you are supposed to have? Whether it be your family values why, or your spouse's values why, or your friends' values why, or the worst, the social media values why. Is your why actually your why? And interestingly, it often takes a ton of time to actually figure that out, because we're really good at being convinced that our why is our why when it's not our why. and often it takes time. And part of it is because we believe success has to fit into this very specific box. And at the point that we can get past that and say, success looks like for me at this point in time, in this stage in my life, in the things that are going on in my world right now, looks like X. That doesn't mean it has to look like that even next year. It doesn't even have to, it can change. But if we can get really clear on that, when it's your success, when it's truly your success, you will be motivated. This goes back to the ACT thing that Sonia was talking about. I mean, we're completely aligned. And until we get really good answers for that, everything else is kind of noise.
Okay.
Is what happens. I mean, I have a client that I adore, and before she became a client, I knew her at least fairly well, but on a very kind of casual basis. And we had this conversation the very first time before we even officially started working together, was part of the sales conversation. And I asked what she wanted, and she told me, and I just looked at her and I said, yeah, I don't think that's right. Because I could tell it was what she believed success was supposed to look like for her, in her career, in her role, in all the things. But I knew enough, I'd watched her enough to be able to discern enough about her values. It was like, these things do not actually align. And I told her, I said, I don't think you're right. I said, I don't think that's what it really is. I said, if it's what you really want, we will absolutely positively get you there. I said, but if it's not, we're not going to be able to. And I said, but I will, I'll stay with you on the journey until we figure out what that is. It took us 6 to 9 months before she was really able to get clear on what it was. Then we made giant progress really fast. And then at a year or more, probably a year after we stopped working together, because we got her to where she needed to be, we were having a lunch together, and she just said, "I love my life in a way I never believed possible." But it was because we were actually designing her business toward her success, not what she thought success was looking like. She says, "I
Oh my
love
gosh.
Monday morning."
So good. So
And it was
good. Okay.
all of this was operations based.
And I know it's
change
hard.
her profession.
Yeah, and it's hard for people to see that, right? Because back to a lot of what we've talked about, so much of it is hidden. So we're sadly running out of time, because I could have this conversation for like another hour. I don't know if anybody else could have it for another hour, but I could totally have it for another hour, because I am leaving with more questions. But that's just who I am also.
But that's okay, because we're back next week.
We are, and I will talk about that because I'm really excited about next week's topic. But before that, I want you both, and you guys got to keep it succinct. You get like one sentence here, okay? Is based on today's conversation, because we covered a lot of ground. And I'll recap it in a second. But what can a business owner watching right this moment, whether they're watching actually today or they're watching a year from now, what could they do right now to treat operations in their business, to actually truly value the strategic function of operations in their business? What could they do to do it? And how can they show that value to their org? I'm going to go Sonia. I know you hate me. It's okay. It's okay to say you hate me out loud. I'm used to that.
That's why I kept myself muted, so that it's going to be actually really funny, but I would say mind map. Like mind map how your business is working right now. What is happening right now in your business? I want to see like this beautiful map of your customer journey. Like, what is it that's going on? Like, do you even know? And so if you don't know what the operations of your business, like how your clients get this, or even if you're the person providing all of this, like you need it to be mapped out. And so the first thing that I would love for everybody to do, the takeaway, is map out and then look at it and be like, is that really what I want to give my clients? Is that really how I want things to function? Is that beginning trigger and output the objective? Like, are these all working? Are these all aligned? Are these actions actually getting me to where I want to be? And that's why I love mind maps. But that's me. And that was 10 times the number of sentences you asked me for, but that's what you got.
All right, Gwen, you're up.
Mine would be similar, but slightly different. And that is, I would encourage someone to look for whatever problem they're trying to solve. Look where they have never looked before. Don't look at their marketing. Don't look at their sales process. Don't look at their product offer. Look any of those other places that we don't like to look and say, is there something there that might actually be causing the problem?
I don't want to do that though, Gwen. I'm just going to tell you right now. I don't want to do that. That doesn't sound like fun. How do I boss myself around?
I know, but you said, how do we start doing it differently? That's what we do differently. We do the things that we aren't comfortable doing.
Okay, so I heard two things here. So mind mapping, and what I would say, because they tie together very well, in that mind map, dig deep and explore the areas that we haven't explored before. So looking at all those different pieces in the mind map and drilling down, I would guess until you run out of whys, right? Until you get to the last why, probably. Okay, so I don't like my homework at all as a business owner. I'm just going to tell you about that. I don't like it, but I'm going to do it. I hope people watching or listening do it as well. So what we've talked today, and it's a little bit of a misnomer, right? Because we talked about the undervalued role of operations in a business, but really what we did is we talked about like really where that hidden impact is that business operations provides. How, $1,000 of sales doesn't add $1,000 to the bottom line, but $1,000 in savings frequently equals $1,000 across the board, and how important that is. Talked a lot about the pandemic being a beautiful, if not highly uncomfortable and not much fun, experience and illustration of where operations can successfully set you up to pivot when necessary, and where it can actually like be that make or break point. And then you gave us some yucky homework that I don't really appreciate, quite honestly, which is that if I want to truly make myself value this operations and actually look for the impact that's not easy to see, I'm going to mind map my whole business, my customer journey, my sales process, my marketing, like a whole business, soup to nuts. And then to Gwen's point, I'm going to keep asking myself why and drilling into those aspects that I don't like to dig too deeply into. Does that sound about right? Okay, so I managed to sum that all up in, I think, less than a minute. Yay. So for those of you watching, right, I want you to do the homework. If you're listening right now, do the homework. Let us know how it goes. This is going to wrap up this week's installment of Biz Ops Exposed. I just want to say thank you to Gwen. Thank you to Sonia. You guys are so brave to put up with all my never-ending questions and my desire for you to explain yourselves further. If today's discussion by any chance has sparked a question, or you are looking to actually transform how your business is operating, or maybe to just get an outside perspective on it, I encourage you to reach out to Gwen or Sonia directly. If you have questions or maybe some suggestions for future topics, definitely bring them to me because I would love to hear them. And I would love to have you join us next week, where we are, same time, same channel, going to take this conversation further to discuss how you can figure out the root cause of your business bottleneck. And when I'm talking about, how do you know if your problem's actually sales and marketing, or if the problem could be a little bit deeper? So my name is Tonya Kubo, and I want to thank you for watching. And I just look forward to our next time together, which is a week from today. And in the meantime, stay operational. And I want to see you at our next episode. Have a great day.